Villanova University. I am delighted to welcome you all here this afternoon to our program, which is organized and funded by the Department of Defense, entitled Why We Serve. We're very pleased to welcome 3 active members of the U.S. military to answer that question of why they serve. We will begin with Captain John Sand, who is a 13-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. He has recently returned from an assignment in Iraq, and he will be speaking to us about why he has been serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom. We will then hear from Senior Chief Petty Officer Ralph Chavez. He is an 18-year veteran of the United States Navy and is currently serving or has been recently serving in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. And we will conclude by hearing from Technical Sergeant Paralyn McClain, who is an 11-year veteran of the United States Air Force, and she will be talking to us about why she has been serving in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. So thank you again for coming. Thank you to all of you, and please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, first I'd like to thank Professor Gustafson for inviting us out here today. This is really a great opportunity for us to, meet the young men and women that attend our universities and get to speak to them about our experiences overseas. Again, my name's Captain Sand. I'm a Marine Corps artillery officer. I just returned from Iraq on October 14th of this last year. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm from a small town in Illinois called Ottawa. There's about 18,000 people. Both my parents were teachers. I grew up playing sports, and after school I decided to join the Marine Corps, and I enlisted in 1991. Have some technical difficulty here. After joining the Marine Corps, I served 4 years on active duty. I was a Morse code operator. I learned Morse code at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and served in the signals intelligence field. After that, I got out of the Marine Corps and attended Illinois State University and received my commission in 1998 and became an artillery officer. Since then, I've served in the artillery community, also in the Marine Corps Security Force community, and most recently as a battery commander for Tango Battery, 5th Battalion, 10th Marines from May of '06 to January of '08. What I'm going to talk to you about today is what we did in Iraq. When I went to Iraq, the regimental commander gave me 3 tasks. First, we were to provide artillery fires in support of the regimental combat team. That basically entailed providing fire support for 5,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines around the Camp Fallujah area. Also, we provided an explosive ordnance disposal team security. So if we got the call there was an improvised explosive device somewhere in our area of operations, my guys went out with the EOD team to neutralize that IED threat. And then finally, we had a platoon of Marines that provided security escort to anyone in and around Camp Fallujah, mainly Army engineers. Their job was to get on the roads and actually find IEDs. And that way we helped to make the roadways safer for our fellow coalition forces and also the Iraqi people. A typical patrol would be anywhere from 6 to 12 hours. Usually leave about 8 o'clock in the evening, and hopefully we were back by 6 o'clock in the morning for breakfast. Driving 5 miles an hour down dirt roads, hoping we didn't get blown up. And most of the time we found the IEDs, the good way. We found them before they exploded, and every once in a while we'd find them the hard way. Fortunately, I took 131 Marines to Iraq, and I came home with 131. And I'm very proud of that. The most serious injury my battery sustained was a 3rd-degree concussion. So we were very lucky over there, but I attribute that to the professionalism of the soldiers and Marines that we worked with, and a little goodness from upstairs that was looking out for us while we were over there. Talk to you very briefly about what we did there. When we shot artillery, it's a 16,000-pound howitzer. It shoots a 95-pound projectile. At its max range, we could reach out and touch someone 18 miles away, 30,000 kilometers. That's with a rocket-assisted projectile. The max effective casualty radius is 50 meters. We would shoot a max rate of fire of 4 rounds per minute and could sustain that to 2 rounds per minute. While we were in Iraq, we shot 1,300 plus rounds of artillery ammunition at the enemy. And it wasn't just all lethal munitions. We also fired illumination missions for our fellow soldiers and Marines out there on the deck so they could see at night. We fired smoke screens to cover our troops as they moved from place to place. So we were out there trying to protect our fellow service members out there taking the fight to the enemy. In the convoy security escort business, we conducted over 500 security patrols. We did everything from escort Katie Couric on her tour of Fallujah to escorting other VIPs, General Petraeus. You know, whether that was another Army VIP or a sailor, but we were always on the road, and our Marines really worked really hard. Our Marines worked very hard while they were there. I apologize for how the slideshow went down, but I'll talk to you very briefly about why I serve. Initially, I joined the Marine Corps because I wanted a challenge, and I simply wanted to know if I had, you know, what it takes to be a Marine. And the reason I came back, it turned into, it was for the brotherhood. It was for the Marine that serves on your left and the Marine that serves on your right, and the special bond that you feel with that person, and the sacrifices that you make for each other, and the sacrifices we as service members in all services make for our country. And I think that really, once you've been a part of that, it really gets in your heart, and that's why you stick around. Secondly, I did it for my family. I'm married and I have 3 kids, and I have another one on the way. And you know, I just want my kids to grow up in a country, you know, that has the liberties and have them experience all the freedoms that we have in our great country. And finally, I did it, you know, for my brothers that didn't come home. Good friends lost over there, and I do it for them. You know, a fellow Marine lost his life in Fallujah, in the Battle of Fallujah. And I'll tell you a very quick story about Corporal Clairday. Corporal Clairday was a clown. He always had a smile on his face. He was a great young Marine. And I just remember on one training exercise, we were out in the security perimeter, and Corporal Clairday went up, got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, make a head call, as we call it in the Marine Corps. Well, Corporal Clairday got lost in the woods and didn't come back. I felt really bad having to go to my commanding officer and be like, "Hey, sir, I'm missing a Marine." Well, where did he go? Well, he went out to take a leak, and he didn't come back. Well, Corporal Clairday found his way to the road and got picked up by range control, and long story short, he ended up making it back, and he was okay, and it was great. Well, Corporal Clairday later, in the Battle of Fallujah, basically stormed a house single-handedly to engage insurgents that were shooting at his friends. And he died there. And that's rough. And I miss those guys. And later on, for his actions, the Corporal Clairday that couldn't find his way around in the woods was awarded the Navy Cross, which is the second highest medal for valor in combat. So finally, that's the reason why I continue to serve. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name is Senior Chief Ralph Chavez, and I'm with the Navy, and I'm going to discuss my reasons for serving and my experiences overseas. I joined the Navy back in 1989. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, which is a primarily Air Force and Army town, but after going to college, I went to the University of Texas in San Antonio for a few years, trying to find a meaning in my life, trying to find a direction, and was having a little bit of a problem. So I made the decision to join the military. A little bit of a family history, had uncles and relatives that served in World War II in Korea. I felt that the service was noble because it was above self-gratification. It was about protecting my family, about protecting my fellow Americans, and I wanted adventure. So I joined the Navy. And for 17 years, this was the Navy, the wooden ships, Iron Men, sailing around the world, working with other countries and their navies to do training exercises. But at the same time, we also did meaningful evolutions like looking for drug smugglers in the Caribbean, trying to stem the traffic of drugs coming into this country. And I enjoyed it. Every morning I woke up, I had a different mission, I had a different adventure, waking up in different ports, learned new skills, and had fellow sailors that I called brothers that made my experience in the Navy just memorable. But in October of 2005, I had volunteered for what they called an individual augmentee assignment. And basically what it is the war in Afghanistan and Iraq has taken a great toll on our Army and Marine brothers and sisters to the point where they needed additional manpower. And they looked to the Navy and to the Air Force to provide that manpower. And I volunteered to serve on a mission in Afghanistan to be civil affairs with the 10th Mountain Division, who is presently assigned to Afghanistan. If you're not familiar, Afghanistan's in southern Asia, and those are some of the statistics about it. 31 million people, 647,000 square kilometers, but where the problem is one, major export is opium, the #1 opium exporter in the world. Two, only 12% of that land is arable, meaning that those Afghans are struggling to just eke out an existence on their own. And after being in that country for a year, you really learn what poverty really is. So I was assigned to Gardez district, shown by that arrow. Close to the Pakistan border, there was a lot of Taliban influence in there. Our job was to help with reconstruction efforts. We were not the folks that broke down the doors or go fight the bad guys. Civil affairs was involved in helping to strengthen the country, its infrastructure, its security, so that it could get back on its feet and the people could pretty much take control of their own lives. These were the people that I served with. I was on a 4-man civil affairs team led by a Navy lieutenant and by 2 junior enlisted sailors. And we were attached to the 10th Mountain and go out on daily patrols to meet and greet villagers in the 2 provinces that we were assigned to. We did over 300 leader engagements, talking to the villagers. A lot of times it was going out with members of the Afghan National Army or the Afghan National Police, and we go out and make ourselves known. Hey, we're the Americans, we're in town, how can we help you? Sometimes the meetings were very informal. As this picture shows, it was meeting a headmaster to a local school, sitting down and talking, how can we help you? We know how important education is, and so does the Taliban. They realize that an educated person pretty much will not have sympathy for their cause. We want to see their children educated. We want to see them have the books they needed, or maybe help to rebuild the school that may have been destroyed by the Russians, or not even have a school and build one from scratch. So we would sit down, and that was one of the first stops we did, was look at the schools. How can we help them? And we work in concert with the Department of Ministry, or the Ministry of Education there in Afghanistan, to make sure that we were working with their guidelines. We were considered guests in Afghanistan, not occupiers. So we want to make sure that we were assisting in how the Afghans wanted things done. Some of the things we also did was go out in villages and provide medical assistance, medical screenings. Many of these villagers could not afford to see doctors, or the doctor was maybe several hundred miles away, and these villagers had maybe a donkey or no transportation other than their own 2 feet. So if somebody got sick, there was a lot of praying and maybe some home remedies, and that was it. So the mortality rate was pretty high. We would go into villages loaded with as many medical supplies as we could pack in the Humvee with our medics and our physician assistant, and we would see as many people as we could. Give out medicines to the children, vitamins to the younger kids, prenatal medicines for the women expecting, and try to help with any acute type of illnesses. We also made a point to drop off as much humanitarian supplies as we could. In the wintertime, many of these villages were lacking heat, lacking food, jackets to keep warm. So we would go out and try to distribute. A lot of the supplies came from the American government, but guess what? Half of the supplies I gave out were also from the American public, from charity groups back here in the States, boys clubs, Boy Scouts, knitting groups in Arizona, saying we know that people are living poor over there. My grandson told me how poor they are. We've knitted little mittens for them or socks, and please distribute them. We've had corporations like Disney provide supplies for schools. So it was our job. We thought it was very important to go out and distribute these supplies and make a difference. You know, if we could provide educational supplies for a child, if we could build a new hospital, build a water well for a village that didn't have water, then we felt that we made a difference. One village at a time maybe, but it was a difference for those folks. And it was something that we felt, not only that we were making a difference, but the villagers also felt it too. Many times they would come up to us and say, thank you. Thank you very much for leaving your country, leaving the safety of your home and your loved ones, and coming thousands of miles away so that you can help us. You know, you're not like the Russians who came down here to occupy us and to bring death and destruction, which we could see the remains and the evidence all over. They said, you know, we know you're coming here to help us, and we want your help. And that was our valediction, our confirmation that we were doing the right thing. And they would invite us into their homes and share meals with us, not only because it was the Muslim culture, but because they were truly gratified and grateful for having us, that we were there to help them and make their lives better. And in the tour that I was at from February of 2006 to February 2007, we delivered over, I would say, medical screens for 3,000 local Afghans, 10,000 pounds of humanitarian aid, and I would say about 200 leader engagements. We did contracts for about up to $1 million, whether it be building schools, water wells, small road projects, and that was just our little four-man group. So in the end, I came back in February 2002 very, very happy and felt that we made the world safer. I mean, the sooner they could get their country up and running and guard their borders and keep their people safe, then the quicker we could come home and carry on with our lives. And they knew that, and we know it. And overall, I thought it was a great mission. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be followed by Tech Sergeant McClain.
Not a big fan of the podium. I'm going to stand up front here. I'm Air Force Technical Sergeant Lynn McClain. I've been in the military for about 15 years. That's kind of an interesting story I'll get into about that in just a moment. I am originally from Mays Landing, New Jersey, so I'm a local girl. I'm right across the river. And also, I was stationed at McGuire Air Force Base, so I can thank my fellow colleagues from McGuire Fort Dix for being here. It's very appreciated. And also I'd like to thank all the veterans who are out there. Can I just have anyone out here who's a former veteran? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Definitely appreciate your service. Oh, Professor, I'll leave you down.
They said they couldn't see you.
Oh, okay, okay. This slide presentation is going in the background. It's a continuous loop. It's showing some of the things that I got to witness and experience while I was in Afghanistan. Now, my job in the Air Force is intelligence. When I went on this deployment to Afghanistan, I did not know exactly what it was going to entail. As an intelligence analyst with the Air Force, when we get different assignments, it's very broad, and you may not always know what you're going to be doing. When I first got in the country, I ended up working mostly at a Bagram Air Force Base, which is one of the initial receiving points for the country. And then from there, I moved to Kabul, which is the capital. And at that point, I did a lot of behind-the-scenes type of work. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of learning a lot about activities that are going on in the country. And after doing that for about a month, I ended up networking with quite a few people and learning a lot about a lot of the behind-the-scenes things that were going on. And from there, I ended up moving to a team that specialized in going out and talking to people to provide information about potential terrorist activity, enemy activity, anything that could be a potential threat for our forces that were over there. And this job took me out and about quite a bit. As I said earlier, I was basically in the capital of Kabul, and I would be on the road in the city of Kabul quite a bit. However, I ended up going to Bagram, which was the place I was talking about when I initially began. And I would travel back and forth. On a daily basis, I would talk to coalition leadership. I work with easily 20 different nations. I would talk to them and we would exchange information. We would talk about different things that we saw happening in the country, and we would kind of compare notes and work on up-channeling that information to our leadership to help protect our forces. This was a very rewarding and exciting mission. Being, as an Air Force intelligence analyst, I never really got a chance to be out on the front line, so to speak. And I didn't do it every day, but I would say at least once a week, I would be going out, traveling around, actually armed up. I usually would carry 2 weapons, usually a short weapon, a pistol, M9 usually, and a longer weapon, which was an M16 or an M4. And every time I would go out, I'd have to have at least 2 weapons on me. Usually, when we would go out, we would take 2 vehicles, and we would drive around and talk to different people and learn different things, and in turn, pass it on and talk to our coalition counterparts and see what information they had obtained, again, compare notes. Now, as Chief Chavez was explaining, there are a lot of different missions over there, not all the banging down doors and gut and glory type of thing. There are a lot of different missions out there. A lot of it is humanitarian aid. On my particular mission, I did do a lot of that indirectly. As I said earlier, the people we would talk to were local nationals. We would have interpreters talk to these people for us and get information. Well, in turn, after they gave us information, they would quite often need help, need assistance of various types, either financially, protection for their families, a variety of different things. So in turn, after they helped us, we would help them. So again, involved in humanitarian aid as well. Now, another thing that I had the advantage of working in this particular environment, I don't know if any of you are familiar with rank structure. I'm not a high-ranking person, I'm not a low-ranking person. I'm about in the middle. And in an environment where I was working, it was very, very important to have a little bit more rank. So when I was selected for this team, I was very, very honored, and I was determined to do well with it. And a little bit, at first, a little concerned, okay, can I really do this? There's one thing I can say that the Air Force does very well, and that is we give people the opportunity to be creative and think of innovative ways of doing things, and things that normally would not have been done. And we're allowed those liberties, those freedoms to act beyond what is normally considered our positions. And that was very much what I had the chance to do when I was in Afghanistan. I had a chance to flourish and think and suggest, hey, what about looking at this way of talking to people, or have you considered so-and-so, or things like that. And it was very effective, and it helped out. And whenever we would get information that would help people, and we would check this information and see how it matched up. And it ended up protecting a lot of people and a lot of missions. Specifically, we found out a lot of times after the fact, it really was fulfilling, and it meant a lot. Now, as I was saying earlier also, the different branches of service, people ask, I've been doing this for a few weeks now, and I have a lot of high school students that ask me different things, like, oh my goodness, are you afraid of dying? You're a very attractive lady, you're afraid of going out and dying. And at first that was kind of an interesting question for me. I was like, oh my goodness, yeah, I definitely thought of dying, absolutely. However, whenever I go out on missions, I would not let that overwhelm me or prevent me from carrying on what I need to do. Because if you're ridden with fear, you're thinking about dying, you're thinking about being shot, you're thinking about being blown up, you can't do what you have to do. So, again, when I say I serve to make a difference, I take all that into consideration. I take all the things of there's potential threat to my life, and when you wear the uniform, that definitely comes with the territory. However, I do believe that everyone can make a difference, and no matter how small or large, if you are strong in what you do and continue to support your mission and do your work, it definitely pays off, and I definitely serve to make a difference. Well, thank you very much for your attention and your time. I definitely appreciate everyone for being here. I want to bring one more program up real quick, Professor. One of the other programs that we're talking about while we're on tour is the America Supports You.mil program. And this is a program that gives the American public the opportunity to provide different things to troops that are overseas. Again, this is America Supports You.mil, and this will give you the opportunity to provide care packages, different other things that military people overseas might need assistance with. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you all. They were nice enough to say that they would take some questions and comments and respond to them. So if anyone's interested, I'll ask you to ask a question. If you want, you can direct it either to Captain Sand, to Chief Petty Officer Chavez, or to Sergeant McClain, and I will ask them for the benefit of the video if they will repeat your question, just so you can expect that. So. I better put on my glasses, since I'll probably be able to have some chance of seeing you if I do that. Please, Joe.
Thank you for coming. One of the main objections to 20th century warfare is that it kills a lot of civilians. In our Civil War, other wars, army against army on a battlefield, but not true in Afghanistan, largely not true in Iraq. Can you please give us examples, and please begin with Captain Sand, because you fired artillery, examples of the way you fire so that you were taking care not to kill civilians with your firing. And I'm sure you others, in meeting people in a war area, heard some complaints about Americans either deliberately or maybe indeliberately killing civilians. Can you give us some understanding about how often it happens, how it was avoided, how you would deal with it, how bad you thought the situation was, please?
Yes, sir. Basically, the question, if everybody didn't hear it, was how we try to minimize collateral damage and casualties to civilians. Now, as an artilleryman, like I said, I could shoot a 95-pound projectile out to 18 miles. But before we could pull the lanyard on that, there was a series of things that had to happen. Whoever owned that piece of land, the unit that owned that piece of land, when we would get the target, they would have to clear that area called the point of origin. They would have to clear it saying, hey, we don't have any friendlies in there, there's no civilians in there, okay, point of origin cleared. They would have to confirm that there was impact somewhere else. So, for example, if an insurgent mortar was shooting at my base, we'd have to confirm, yes, rounds impacted here, this is where they came from, that area is clear of friendlies and civilians. Then they would have to clear the no-strike list. Basically, a no-strike list is everything from a school to a mosque to all these critical infrastructure that we don't want to damage when we shoot back. And then they would have to clear the airspace. And after they'd done all those things, then my Marines on the gun line could pull the lanyard and send that round down range. Now, even when we shot illumination, the illumination is an air burst. Now, if that would fail to function, we had to predict the grid where that round would land if it didn't explode and come down with the illumination candle, basically. So if that round failed to function, it would have to land in a safe area where it wouldn't hurt civilians. And on the other side, just as a ground pounder, obviously there's rules of engagement, and to the best of our ability throughout the services, we try to follow the rules of engagement to a T. They're there to protect us, and they're also there to protect the innocent civilians. And so we follow those rules to the best of our ability.
In my experience, I mean, being civil affairs, it wasn't always about handing out food. I mean, we were involved in combat operations. Like Captain Sand said, rules of engagement were developed and utilized to prevent needless loss of life or injuries. Rehearsals, when we did operations, we always did it with the Afghan National Army Police, and we did rehearsals, so everybody knew what they had to do. And then if we were looking for somebody, had to break down a door because we were looking for a bad guy, a lot of times it was the Afghans that were there in the front. Not because we wanted to push them there, but because they could speak the language, they could make sure that the right person was grabbed, arrested, and that we could also help direct. My job was usually helping to direct the civilians out of the area, just like you would see a policeman do in a major bank robbery, where they're keeping civilians out of the area so they don't get hurt needlessly. So we went through great pains to make sure that people weren't hurt. Another example would be we go on convoy. As people know, IED was a very big threat, not only on the road, but many times suicide bombers would be in vehicles, and they would directly and intently drive their vehicles into a U.S. or a coalition convoy and then blow themselves up. We had rules of engagement so that if we saw a vehicle coming to us in a threatening manner, we had an escalation of force. First, maybe we would flash lights to signal them that, hey, you need to steer clear of us, get out of the way. If that did not work, we would use a spotlight. Maybe we would throw a soda can. I mean, shooting at them, we'd try to get their attention. If we had to shoot, then the next would be to try to disable the vehicle. Shooting at the people was like the last resort. And while I was there, it only happened a very small number of times. But we went out of our ways, and at the same time, of course, this is putting us in greater danger, but we realized that we did not want to kill anybody innocently by accident. So we tried to use an escalation of force, use just the amount of force we need to get the job done without possibly hurting any innocent bystanders. That was my answer.
I have a very similar way of looking at it too, as the chief was saying. I was also in Afghanistan. I was in the capital, and that was very much a threat for that area. The car bombings, the suicide bombers, that was more of the issues, concerns we had in that area. Again, we had rules of engagement as well. And also, due to the nature of the job I did, a lot of the attacks, a lot of things that happened, thank goodness we were informed prior to potentially a lot of these things happening. So we were able to not be in the area when these attacks or incidents happen. But again, there definitely are rules of engagement. There definitely are ways that we need to, we're instructed to conduct ourselves. And then also, I had interpreters always with me as well. So again, there are a lot of safeguards in line to keep everything in check.
Let me ask one more thing too. Before those troops even enter the battle space, the training that the Army and the Marines and the Navy provide, because of the lessons learned in previous wars and previous engagements, it is stressed. They put us in realistic scenarios, so we know what to expect. How about what happens if you enter a hostile town and people are throwing food at you, rocks at you? They would go over and rehearse it, and we would do simulations and practice so we don't become startled. We don't act out of fear. So I believe that the 4 months of training that I received prior to entering the theater went a long way to having me be prepared for what I was facing in Afghanistan.
I'm going to put another plug in. My team that's up here is giggling right now. Nothing against you, Chief, but Air Force does this. We are ground instructors. We teach people to do that. And this team here, they do this at Fort Dix on a monthly basis, maybe every couple of weeks. They actually have simulated training sites, and they actually teach people those same things the Chief was talking, exact same thing the Chief was talking about. So it's everybody is learning that. I mean, that's just the way it is right now. We have those rules. We have those rules that we need to go by and get ourselves trained and comfortable as possible.
Good question.
For the two civil affairs people, did either of you interact with any Afghan females? And if so, how did they react, especially to a woman military person?
It was interesting. We did have female interpreters. There were certain areas, in Afghanistan they call areas provinces. There are certain areas where women did different type of work. Traditionally in Muslim culture, women aren't out and about that much, but certain areas, women are kind of laborers, and being there out and about, they are a good source of information. So our female interpreters usually would talk to them. We would not usually have a male interpreter talk to a female source. So as far as me personally, it could be a little awkward, being I am female and I am African American as well. So there was a little standoffness because it was something different, something very different, and the whole American thing. However, we had the interpreters there, and I guess they said, okay, this person's okay, then they're more comfortable to relax.
In my experience, the Muslim culture, again, we had no problems respecting the Muslim culture in interacting with the female children. Once they were below the age of 12, it was allowed. Between 12 and the very elderly, we did not have very much, the males at least. When we went on missions, knowing this, we would bring our female medics or female doctors. So if we were doing a medical screening, they had no problems going into behind the walls and talking to the females. The Afghan males could talk to the females, so we used our interpreters in the Afghan National Army to interact with them. But most of the time, we was curious. They were very interested in what we were doing there, and they would give us little quick peeks. But we learned to respect the culture and not go out looking to talk to them, unless, in some cases, like Sergeant McClain said, in the Capitol, there were some women that occupied ministerial positions, so obviously that was allowed. But it was all about respecting the culture and what that particular village would let us do. Good question.
My question is for Tech Sergeant McClain, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me a little bit about the role of women over in Iraq and some of the hardships you faced as a woman over there?
Again, ma'am, I was based in Afghanistan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay, it's okay. And you mean as a military person, is that what you're saying?
Serving in Afghanistan, a woman serving in Afghanistan.
I was in military intelligence, a lot of the places that a lot of the non-combat or a lot of the non-frontline people, I wouldn't do it on a daily basis, but sometimes I would have to go in those places. So I got to see a different side than a lot of females normally would. And as far as daily, the military, when you're overseas in a combat environment, they try to keep people separated as far as like living quarters and things of that nature. However, when you have to go different places, you have to just live where you can live. I don't know if you were watching my slides, they were going in the background. A lot of times we would go to areas where it was just really run down and just nasty. So you had to live where you could live. So it would be not separated females from males. It was a lot of overflow. But for the most part, females nowadays in the military, all the 4 branches of services, we can go into a lot of different things that you wouldn't expect. Things have a way of just happening unexpectedly. So you have to be prepared that you could be in a combat situation or you could be in something that normally a female is not involved with. So to answer your question, it's evolving. It's definitely evolving.
I have a question for all 3 of you. Does it disturb you when you come home from basically putting your lives on the line in these countries we're at war with? Does it disturb you to come home and see the way the media portrays the war, to see how all these people are against the fact that we are in these wars and how they have all these negative connotations? A lot of them are not informed of all the good that we also do in these countries, as Chief Petty Officer you were saying. Does it disturb you as to how the reaction in our own country is?
No, sir. I'll tell you what, it doesn't disturb me because I knew what we did, but I can understand the frustration of the American public. The media picks and chooses what they want to portray. We had reporters and photographers with us on our missions, on our humanitarian missions, and they took the photographs. But very little bit, based on what I talked to my family and friends, ever reached the American media. So if all I saw in the paper was talking about death and destruction, I can understand why the American public is getting frustrated. And so I am glad and grateful that we have a program like Why We Serve, so we can answer your question and tell you a little bit different information about what's really going on. Not to say that the media is misleading us, but they have a 10-second soundbite they have to sell people on. It's a business. And they tend to focus on, a certain aspect of it. And I think even your Villanova Press, the little newspaper you have out there, had a great article about the media, about the elections, and how they pick and choose, and how the media has a great influence about how people feel towards certain sentiments. They'll give a whole day talking about Hannah Montana and about Britney Spears, but maybe 2 seconds to talk about a Navy SEAL that was awarded the Medal of Honor in Afghanistan. They pick and choose, and obviously, unless we're really willing to dig into the facts and look at what's really happening instead of just going on whatever they throw at us, I can understand it. But personally, it did not affect me because I knew what we did. And what we did was good and it was appreciated by the Afghans. And hopefully by spreading the word to the American public, it'll enlighten those folks to let them know what we're doing as well. You know, the unsung miracles that are going on out there.
I do, sir. When I see the press put a lot of crazy things out there, it's aggravating to me, it's frustrating to me, and I know that a lot of that is, again, they need to sell papers, they need to have their programs going, gore, blood, that excites, that gets attention. So I understand the reason, I understand the whole thing behind that, and I just look at it as, okay, that's unfortunately the way it is. When I get the opportunity, even before I entered this program, I would have people come to me all the time, again, people who normally don't associate with military people, including my family. I'm not from a military family. And people would ask me things, and I purposely would make a point to say, okay, this is the rest of the story. There are only so many things that are put out there publicly. There's more going on behind the scenes, that things that I don't even know as a military member. There's only parts and pieces. So it frustrates me. However, I understand, and it's my position as someone in uniform to correct that, and at any opportunity I can.
And I think lastly, very quickly, you know, I'll speak for myself, but I think it's very important that we live in a country where you have freedom of speech, and whether you're for or against the war, you can put that out there and let the people decide, you know, which is right and which is wrong. And I'm very happy to serve my country and give people that right to pick a side and do what they believe in. So I think that's important.
Thank you for the question.
Let me see, I have two, a woman, and then we'll get you back there. Yes, please.
Okay, first of all, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this segment on why we serve, because it's for that very reason that when you pick up papers and you say, that's not the whole story, that we appreciate you doing this. But notwithstanding anyone's inclination or disinclination or opinion about the war, what do you see is the biggest impediment to progress for developing countries like this to be able to sustain themselves in the long term? I see opium as the biggest export product, and obviously your pictures belied significant poverty and lack of water. Do you find that it's basically infrastructure that is not well developed enough to allow some of these people to, I won't say progress because it's dependent on their culture as opposed to what we consider progress. But other than water availability and arable land, is there, or power? I mean, I don't even know if power is a consideration in Afghanistan. Is there anything else that we haven't thought of that you have addressed tonight that might be considered as a factor in that? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. From my experience in Afghanistan, like you said, a lot of the pictures I showed, it is a very rundown country. However, that has not always been the case. The history of Afghanistan, the Russians came in, did a lot of devastating things. Then right on the heels of that, the Taliban came in, and they're bullies. So the country was a well-thriving, well-civilized country. And it's kind of interesting when I would talk to a lot of the interpreters, the translators I worked with, a lot of them lived in Afghanistan in the 70s, in the 60s. And they would tell me stories about, yeah, that street over there, when I was a kid, it was this, it was that. And it's not necessarily that they're underdeveloped, it's just they've gone through so much. It's just, they've been beat down.
From my experience, ma'am, Afghanistan is poor, you know, relative to our standards. But you're talking about a country that has been on the crossroads of invading armies since Alexander the Great. My opinion, from what I've seen, these people can survive on a candle and a glass of water. It's amazing what they put up with, and they thrive. Their biggest threat right now that's stopping them from developing is security. They cannot protect their borders right now. Too many outside influencers are looking to destabilize that country because it suits their political agenda. You have countries to the left and to the right and maybe even to the north they would like to see Afghanistan the way it is because it works to their political agenda. They do not want to see Afghanistan up on its feet. We seem to be the only ones that really are working. So not only are we trying to help the country, but we're also, it's difficult when you have other nations doing their utmost to destabilize. So I think the sooner that we can get their armed forces up and running to the point where they can protect their people, where the people feel safe in calling 911 and a policeman will arrive to help them, instead of having to be like the Wild West where they have to have an AK-47 to protect themselves from thieves, from people that do them harm. In my time there, I saw the Afghan army becoming a very respected institution. People are joining, and it was actually one of the few institutions in that country where you saw Shiite and Sunnis and Turkic people, people from different ethnicities, live together and work together in harmony. Where perhaps maybe a Shia village would not want to talk to the other village across the mountain because they're Sunni. But in the army, they're all one big homogenous unit. And guess what? They work together and they are loyal to each other. So there's a lot of hope. I think a lot of those were because based on preconceptions and stereotypes that were initiated in that village. And when they actually get to meet these folks, the people from the Tajiks and Uzbeks and Pashtun, they realize, you know what? I was told wrong things. And same thing about Americans. They were told a lot of lies about Americans. That they're going to come over there, they're going to disrespect you, they're going to, destroy your Quran, they're going to destroy your culture. And then when they actually meet us and see the work that we're doing, they're like, it's contrary to what we were told. And that goes a long way toward building trust. So I think the sooner we can get that country's security situation fixed, then we will be on a much quicker road to recovery.
I don't have anything to add on that.
And we had your question.
Captain Sam, you said you're from Ottawa, Illinois?
Yes, sir.
Is that known as the home of Lincoln?
Illinois or Ottawa itself?
Ottawa itself.
The Lincoln-Douglas debate took place in a park in my hometown, but I don't think it's ever been called the home of Lincoln. So are you from Illinois?
Yeah, from Chicago. I've driven through there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was always fuzzy on whether or not it was called home Lincoln. I
You
know that park is beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyways, when finding an active war zone, assuming you did in Iraq,
Right.
They use guerrilla warfare. Do they ever take mosques or schools or churches, stuff like that, to fire from? And then how do you deal with warfare like that?
I'm trying to remember if there was any instances. Obviously, as an artilleryman and doing convoy security, we weren't the guys that would go in and take care of that. The infantry side of the house, whether it be Army or Marine, would go in and handle that. But I know one of the things that we were very big on doing is if we had a suspected weapons cache or if they did receive fire from a mosque, we would use Iraqi involvement. Pretty much while I was there for 7 months, if you didn't have your Iraqi counterpart right, to your right side, you were wrong. So we did things together, U.S. and Iraqis, and basically if it was something that was a sacred place to the Iraqi people, they were out front, going into the mosque and checking for weapons and things like that, and we would just hold the outside security perimeter. So that's how we would deal with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question for all three of you. The Bush administration has basically called this the War on Terror, which, as the way I understand it, to be a war on all terrorist groups within these countries. Do you expect there to be a successful war on terror where you can actually destroy and dismantle every single terrorist group within the countries? And do you see this happening within the next 10 years, or do you see this to be a very, very, very long war?
Well, sir, by the nature of terrorism, it's a very sneaky and hidden agenda, hidden way of doing business. So as far as eradicating it, I honestly, in my opinion, this is Sergeant McClain, I don't foresee it ending anytime soon. I think it will be something that will continue for many years, and we just have to be smarter and more vigilant on how we protect ourselves, especially going to other countries. But ending it immediately, I don't foresee it.
From my perspective, the way we fought the terrorism was by educating the public. And I'm not saying propaganda, I'm talking about education. Even the elders that I met, we could tell by talking to them the effect that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda had. When we come in, we're looking to build things, we're looking to improve their village. When they came into the village, they would use fear and oppression, night letters saying, stop cooperating with the coalition or we're going to burn down your mosque, we're going to burn down your school. As a matter of fact, just a few months ago, an article came out saying that more and more the students and teachers of Afghanistan are being threatened and being harmed because the Taliban see education as detrimental to their agenda. They know that an educated public will not conform to their agenda. So we're trying to find it from a non-kinetic, not so much how many insurgents can I kill, how many doors I break down, but educating the folks so that they can make a decision on their own. And most likely they're going to want peace, they're going to want harmony, and they're going to want security. You know, whether they vote for Karzai or anybody else to be their president, that's not our decision. But the fact that they're interested in that and interested in taking an interest and control over their destiny, then that's a success. But it starts in baby steps. We may not be able to convince the 30-year-old Taliban who's been hardened by combat for the last 20 years, but we're hoping to make an impact for the children. You know, when the Taliban come into a village and they're telling the children, Americans are devils, you know, we want the child to be able to say, well, you know, that's funny because it wasn't an American that came by and gave me food. It wasn't an American that helped save my little sister and that was sick. Or wasn't an American that built that school that I'm going to now. So we're feeling our actions are speaking a lot louder than their words, but it is a slow and methodical process. Hopefully we will see success, you know, on a greater scale as time goes by.
That was a great question. I don't have anything to add to that.
Any other? Please.
Thank you all for your service.
Thank you.
And I have a question. The word translator came up a few times, and I remember one of our big problems before, leading up to 9/11 and realized at that time, was in intelligence, in the whole intelligence community, there was a lack of people who could understand, who could read, who could speak, you know, the languages of that area. And in the years that you served there, I was wondering if you noticed any improvement in that, you know, in your own personal experience. I think you've probably been helped lately by more cooperation with the locals, but I mean, you know, from you know, coming from stateside, were you getting any help in translation?
I'm sorry, sir, as far as when I'm in America, as far as getting jobs?
No, yeah, were you getting, you know, you're getting translations, your translators in, over there were local, primarily?
No.
Or were you getting some that were trained here? That's what I was asking.
The team that I work with, sir, most of them were either actually from Afghanistan, and when the country went really bad in the 70s approximately, when the Russian occupation took place, their families moved them to America or Canada or Europe. So the people that I work with, they either were U.S. citizens or citizens of other countries. However, they were at Afghani heritage because they had to have certain clearances, certain level of trust for the type of work we were doing. Now, as far as local translators, local interpreters, most of them were usually working on the installation, helping with security, helping interpret when people would be, military people would be instructing their soldiers how to do, the Afghani soldiers how to do things. Those usually were more local people. But as far as certain sensitive jobs, yeah, those people came from other places, and they were of Afghani heritage. However, they were not locally from there. A lot of them had worked for the government for many years as well. So,
was that improving through the years? That's what
improving? Well, I was over there for about 7 months. The whole time I was there, yeah, everything was very situated, and we had ways of doing things that had been tried out and worked for a period of time. So we just stuck with it, and it
had to be
very
better
well.
than it was before then.
I certainly was, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
I know from my experience, I saw it the other way around. Obviously, like Sergeant McClain said, we hired Afghans. The ones that needed to translate critical documents or eavesdropping on communication were usually American citizens, had a clearance. those that were used to help soldiers just navigating throughout the countryside were usually local. Problem is, as we were becoming more successful in 2006, a lot of the Afghan translators were getting bounties on their heads. There was a lot of pressure placed on them saying, because you're a collaborator, you're an infidel, we're going to kill you, not only kill you, but kill your family. So in some cases, some of them had to stop working for us, or they would pack up and move to Pakistan or another country because, and I don't blame them, they were worried about their families. So as a result of our success, there was a lot of danger. So we usually kept our interpreters on the base to protect them, but it started getting harder and harder to recruit people because they knew, in Afghan culture, it's an extended family. You can't just say, well, I'm safe, so I'm fine. But he has several generations of family back in the village, and they worried about him. So it was getting tougher to recruit from what I saw because of the threat placed by the Taliban.
When did you come back? When were you last there?
2000. I came back February 2007, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I returned in April 2007, sir.
For myself, unfortunately, we didn't have an interpreter. We had 131 Marines, and there wasn't enough to go around. In the nature of our business, we didn't run into too many times where we needed one. And if we did need one, we could call our higher headquarters and say, hey, we'd like to get an interpreter for the day. But additionally, prior to leaving for Iraq, a percentage of our Marines went through survival level Arabic instruction. And I think we're getting better about trying to train our service members prior to going over there so that they have a basic language, fundamental language there so they can at least converse a little bit with the local populace. And I think that's an improvement.
I have a lot of respect for the work that you all do. I am sort of in awe of my father, my oldest brother, for having been in combat in World War II and Vietnam. But my question for you all is, I was reading the sort of official PR material that came to us faculty regarding why we serve, and it said, it's not designed to influence, this presentation is not designed to influence public opinion about the war on terror. But do you have any concern that nonetheless this panel really is designed to try to influence public opinion, especially in light of the fact that if you look at the public opinion polls seem to indicate that about 65% of the public thinks that at least the war in Iraq, I'm not speaking of Afghanistan, at least the war in Iraq, almost 2/3 of Americans think it was just a huge mistake to have gotten into that war. So do you have any concern that you end up doing a kind of a PR for the Defense Department to influence public opinion in an adverse public opinion environment?
I'm hoping that we are just giving the American public food for thought. The more information, the American public is very smart, and we're hoping that the more information we can give them, whether it's positive or negative, it would allow them to make a more informed decision during the election time. Like I said, I don't think anybody will dispute that the media is very selective in what information they put out for their own reasons. And we were not given any training other than how to be comfortable in front of an audience or how to feel comfortable in front of a camera for an interview. Our personal experiences is what we were relaying. There is no cards or speeches saying you must cover these items, you must cover these topics. They just told us, go out and tell your story, develop it and tell it. And I think it's information that people want. I know when I came back from Afghanistan, my family and friends were amazed at the stories and they kept saying, tell us more, why don't we hear this? Why is all we're hearing is this, this, and this? So I think this program is just giving more food for thought for the American public. What they choose to use that information for is up to them, and that's the power of speech and the power of press. But we just want to be able to just tell our experiences and allow you to decide on yourselves whether or not it's just or not. That's the power of the ballot, and that's what makes this country so great, that we can exchange ideas, exchange different perspectives, and then hopefully make the right decision. That's my perspective.
Well, like Captain Sand was saying earlier, our part of our job is to protect that freedom of speech, protect people's rights to have that variety, to look at different things. And even though I'm in the military, there's certain things, certain rules I have to play by. This was a personal decision of mine to join this team. And if it was a Svengali propaganda type of thing, I don't know if I could have been part of that. I like the idea, as I said earlier, of being able to just talk and tell people different things they would have insight or have exposure to, like my family members who are not military. And I know there's other people out there. Every time I've been out on the road, I've had people talk to me afterwards. A lot of times people don't want to talk in front of a big forum and just ask me different things. So, sir, not at all. I know that our program is not out there to be the anti-propaganda type of mission.
Last thing I'd like to add is when I come and speak to groups such as this, I like to get across the point that, I'm not from a real big town. I went to a university and sat in auditoriums very much like this, and I volunteered to serve my country, and I'm very proud of that. And that's just a personal decision, and I like to, get back in touch with the American people and say, hey, we're your military, and we're proud to be of service to you, and just have that connection between the people in the military, and say, hey, we've all sat in the same seats, and we're average Joes, just like anybody else doing a job.
I guess as a follow-up to that, thank you very much for tackling that question.
And money to help them, and you're going to have some corruption going a long way. The money goes to the central government, but sometimes doesn't trickle down to the small little village like it should. So we're working to tackle that. We're trying to work that by teaching the ministers and the politicians good governance. If you want to take care of your country, this is what you got to do. Teaching professionalism, just like we teach professionalism with the Army, we're trying to teach good governance techniques with the politicians, the ministers. Teach them that, hey, you are a servant of the people. You're there to serve them, not to fill your pockets with money. And there's other things too. Obviously, we're trying to, there was a little bit of frustration as far as making sure that the other government organizations, the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, USAID, spent the money where we felt, or the government felt it was best. Sometimes some of these organizations go in with their own little agendas for whatever reason, but it's not really helping the people. And I'll give you an example. An organization comes into a village, and because they want to make the headlines, they can say, we gave these 3 villages generators so they can have electricity. So it looks good on a newspaper. And that's great, and I'm sure the reason behind it was genuine. But then you step back and say, okay, that's great, now you gave them a generator. Where are these poor little villagers going to get the money to buy the fuel to keep this generator going year after year after year? It looks good for your organization, it looks good for your fundraising efforts that you're doing something to help people, but going back, we try to fight that by coming up with alternative renewable sources, like, let's spend the money to make a micro hydro power plant, or using wind power or solar power. So there were some frustrations in dealing with other organizations because they were more interested in their PR than they were in actually trying to provide long-term help. That was my experience.
I have to take advantage of the podium and ask a couple of questions. I've got about 1 million, but I won't ask all of them. If there was one specific thing that you would like to see done that would improve the situation however you see it, increase the surge, reduce it by 20,000, increase the funding, what's one specific thing in Afghanistan and Iraq that, given where we are now, would most improve the situation? In no particular order.
That's a very good question. While I was in the Fallujah area, the key, in my opinion, to that area was the Iraqi police. In the city of Fallujah, once the Iraqi police force was properly trained, equipped, and they're doing a phenomenal job. They're standing on the street corners. They're doing their thing. But as far as being able to get them the training to increase their numbers to where they need to be so we can get them out on the streets. And I think maybe that would be it, is limited assets as far as training people to be Iraqi army, training people to be Iraqi police. If we get the pieces in place that we can get those numbers up, they're ready and willing to start taking on a lot of the responsibility. So that would be my answer.
I just think that we need to get away from just thinking that sometimes throwing money at a situation will make it better. We really need to know how we're spending the money and making sure that it does meet its long-term goal. Like my example, just throwing money to build a generator for a village does not help the long-term goal of providing power for that village. Just throwing money, for example, what I saw in creating and maintaining a police academy. Well, that's great for the 2 weeks that the recruit's there, but what about longer-term training and for that policeman when he's out on his beat? You know, will those 2 weeks of training give him the necessary background so that he can serve his fellow Afghans like we expect our policemen, you know, service above self, you know, a civil servant. So I think we need to really look long-term at our effects and our actions and see, is this going to solve the problem not only now, but 10 years from now? But that was just my limited scope.
I was wondering, do you know how much the generators cost that they're provided?
Depending on how many kilowatts you want. I mean, it could be a small little Honda generator, you know, to supply a couple light bulbs for maybe a 20-person village. Or in some cases, we spend millions of dollars to buy a generator to provide power to the capital of Kabul. So it depends if we're trying to build a whole electric grid or we're just looking at sometimes a generator to run a pump, for example. Right. It all depended on what the needs were. But a lot of the stuff, because of where we were located, where you could get a Honda generator here for maybe $300 or $400, would cost $1,000 over there because of where it had to be shipped and the transportation logistics. Afghan does not have any port of its own, so things either get shipped from India or from Pakistan or from Iran. So obviously that's going to increase the cost.
Would like $50,000 or $60,000 be? Do you think the government would be interested in spending that amount of money for solar power, like solar-powered house or hospital to set up for in Afghanistan?
Well, we did. We looked at options like solar power. The problem was not the solar cells or the actual. The problem was the distribution system. You know, I can set up a solar power collection system. That's great. But the expensive part was running a distribution system, creating a distribution system so it can go to every home. So you're talking. I mean, we looked at a small little village of maybe 60 people costing $100,000. Just because of the extra increase in cost for the cells as well as the distribution system and the power converters and stuff like that.
I was thinking more of just for like one school that would be a recreational use, part hospital, part...
That's a good question. I would have to defer to some folks a lot smarter than I am as far as, because they would have to look at the school, see what the needs are, but I think anything would help. I mean, they would be happy with candles in many cases because they don't even have that. They don't even have windows.
Is Afghanistan relatively cold or warm? I thought it was going
to... Depends on what part. In the north is mountainous, heavily wooded. In the area that I was at, in Gardez, I was up at 7,000 feet elevation up in the mountains, so very little vegetation, no trees, lots of snow. If you go south, toward Kandahar, that's where you're talking desert-like environment, 120 degrees in the summer. So it all depends, just like the United States, what part of the country you happen to be in. Some of it was very lush and looked like a jungle. Other parts looked like the Mojave Desert.
If there's no... Oh, okay, one more question, I think. Yes, please.
I just had a question. Throughout any of your careers, have you ever reached a moment where maybe your job or your career personally you don't always believe in, but how do you differentiate personal beliefs with being in the military in case those don't always align?
So basically what you want to know is if during our careers we've ever had a conflict with what our gut or heart feels and what we're asked to do, right? Well, you know, personally, that's a very good question. I think for myself, the biggest thing is one, I volunteered to wear this uniform, so it's something I chose to do. And when I made that decision, you know, I said, yes, I will support the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and obey the orders of the leaders appointed over me. And, you know, that's an oath I take very seriously. So, you know, while I wear this uniform, you know, sometimes, you know, everybody has their opinion, especially during this political election year, you know, on who's the right candidate. But, you know, when I have the uniform on, I do what my leaders ask me to do, and I go where the American people tell me to go, you know, with our appointed leaders. So I haven't really had that problem of between personal and professional.
Same thing I would say is, you know, if the time comes to where I cannot reconcile what my personal values are and my service, and that's the time that I don't re-enlist. But I've been very happy for the 18 years I've been in, and I also rely on the American public to use the power of the ballot, the power of the free press, to make sure that we, the military, are used, you know, in a respectable and an honorable fashion. I mean, that's what makes it so great. You know, the commander-in-chief, he is, but he's also a servant to the public. So I use my power of the ballot, and I expect my fellow citizens to use their power of the ballot to make sure that lives are not wasted and that we're using the military in a proper fashion.
I can say that I have not had conflict. When I was in the beginning introducing myself, and I was talking about I had been in the military, I've been in the military for 15 years. Well, I was in the military initially coming out of high school. And then I was in for about 8, 9 years, then had a little break, got out and came back in. So I was very much aware and cognizant of what the military was about, the Air Force specifically. So when I came back in, I came in with the knowledge that, okay, this is what I'm going for, this is what I'm going to do to finish out my career and support to serve, to support the nation, and I was very much aware of this. So I definitely, it's not conflict for me. I've made that understanding, and I've agreed to it. So this is the way I'm gonna conduct myself.
Good question.
I'd like to thank you all for coming. I think that we all agree that perhaps the most important decision a government makes is deciding when and how to use force, when to endanger the lives of people of this quality. And they have answered why they serve. I think we have to answer in this electoral season how we will serve to make sure that our government makes the correct decisions regarding that question. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.